Ukraine failure. But here in UK, who have we got? Well, we've got very dangerous individuals like Boris Johnson. And I want to just come back to have a look at this trail of Boris moving from Davos straight into the Ukrainian theatre. So some quotes here. This is him. Thank you, Victor Pinchuk Foundation, for hosting the Ukrainian breakfast at Davos. The session demonstrated the unity across nations that Ukraine must and will win. Well, let's remember that this isn't anything to do with nation states making the decision. This is globalists meeting for breakfast and deciding how overseas wars are going to be fought. He went on to say, we must ensure that Zelensky has the tools he needs to finish the job. This is the moment to double down. Now, in a way, this is utter nonsense because Ukraine at the moment is losing. There is no question of this. And so what we're going to be doing is reinforcing failure. That's going to drag the war out. And that is going to mean that tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more Ukrainians are going to die because Russia is dominating on the battlefield. But here's the sort of thing that Boris Johnson was tweeting out. So this is the source tweet for his statement that there's got to be unity across nations and Ukraine must and will win. And that's a very interesting statement because what is he talking about there? Well, I think it's that Ukraine must win because if Ukraine doesn't win, all of a sudden the balance of power with the so-called rules-based international order is going to be overturned by the Russians with support of the Chinese in the background. But essentially, Boris Johnson is a puppet. Who was he acting for when he made these statements? But let's just bring the little video clip on screen of his unexpected latest meeting with Zelensky in Ukraine. Is he there as a private individual? Is he there as a member of parliament? Is he there as a covert representative of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office? We simply don't know as he goes to meet his chum. I'm fascinated by I've used the phrase, the chumminess and the body language here. This is a private meeting, my opinion, with a few bully boys. He's got a green tie on. Is that significant, do you think, Mike? I don't know. We'll see him shortly sitting down at a very posh desk. And where are the minutes of the meeting? When's the UK public going to be told exactly what was discussed? And probably more importantly, what Boris Johnson promised to Zelensky in the future, because of course we can't fix the potholes in the road, but if it's arms for Ukraine, we can deliver as much as possible. So, he goes up the steps, he goes into a very posh room, and the dialogue continues. But this is the key part of the article which caught my attention. Boris Johnson signing an anti-tank weapon to show his support for the Ukrainian regime. I regard this as being, I'm short of words, vile, I think. And is this a private army operating here? Alex, just give me a bit of support because it is disgraceful what we see happening here. This man is out of control. Nobody knows what he's doing. Nobody knows what he's agreeing. But the minimum of his actions is that the war in Ukraine is being prolonged and hundreds of thousands of more people are going to die as a result of Boris Johnson.
Brian, it's not just you. There are respected people in the dissident commentariat who are couching it in very bold terms now that Mr. Johnson would start World War III in order to cover the questions over his, 4/5 of a million loans from relatives and other questionable matters. But I think what's significant about Johnson's visit is that immediately afterwards, Mikhailo Podolyak was announced as the successor, as main advisor to President Zelensky, succeeding in post Arestovych, who you're about to mention. And Podolyak, who's another one of these frighteningly young men with a 1,000-yard gaze, has announced in a public video that as Russia escalates the war, the Ukrainians are going to be using long-range artillery, which, by the way, they have now got from the UK, US, France, and Italy. They're going to be using that to target Russia's three largest megacities: St. Petersburg, Russia, Moscow, and Yekaterinburg, or Chelyabinsk to the older viewers. And that's now been Sverdlovsk, sorry. But that's now actually been made public policy that these three cities are going to be targeted. And smug Mr. Podolyak said that these cities live, in a bubble. They assume that they're above the fray and they're pampered, but they're going to have a rude awakening. So I wonder how much coordination there was between the Johnson faction and this newly appointed Mikhailo Podolyak, who is the next crazy to be advising Zelensky.
Yeah, well, of course, we don't know the answers, but your question is the pertinent question. UK public's got to be asking the question constantly of every minister in this country they can get hold of. Meanwhile, the Mail here is gloating over Moscow's fury about the German and the US tank deal and the details of that. But of course, it's no surprise that Russians are now starting to get very emotive about this, because the reality is, in the background, they remember 8.6 million Russian military war dead, most of which, most of the death occurred on the Eastern Front. And of course, who were they fighting? Well, they were fighting Germans, and they were fighting German tank armies. So the sneer from the Daily Mail is truly disgusting here. But of course, this is more mocking and, in my opinion, trying to inflame Russia and presumably provoke an even greater Russian response. But we just remind audience that on the 18th of January, we were reporting about Arestovych, who'd made the wrong statements as far as Zelensky was concerned about a Russian missile strike. He came out and said, well, of course, it was Ukrainian air defense that deflected the missile and damaged the housing development and caused the Ukrainian civilian casualties. He had to leave post. But there are some other statements which are now being recorded on social media. Now, I can't say this statement is absolutely true. This is one of the statements circulating, but I believe from the sources that I've seen it's likely to be true. And it's a very interesting statement from Arestovych. If everyone thinks we are guaranteed to win the war, then it's very different. I think he means not guaranteed. But this sounds a very sensible statement. Could this be the reason that he was actually kicked out from the Zelensky team? And there's also been unconfirmed social media reports that he's actually crossed the front lines into Russian-held territory. Now, again, I can't prove this. I'm reporting it raw. There have been these statements, but if those statements are true, we are seeing some very, very interesting things happen within the Zelensky administration. What we can say is that, of course, he's been censored, so his Instagram page isn't operating properly anymore. So if you speak out in any way the truth or against the Zelensky government's war, you're going to disappear pretty quickly. Meanwhile, what have we got? Well, we've got a lot more hard recruiting of very young people to get them into the Ukrainian military and up to the front line. This is some film clip that has come from Odessa, and it's showing the way that these recruiting people are operating. This is another clip here with men operating in a shopping centre of some description. And you can see that they've got a relatively young man pinned against the shop front there, as obviously he's trying to be summoned into the Ukrainian military. But the reality of this is, with minimal training, and it doesn't matter whether that minimal training is in Ukraine or Germany or UK, the chances of these young people surviving at the front for more than a few days, that's the reality. They are going to die, and we are helping them die. This was posted over the last few days, and again, I'm giving it to our audience raw. Don't know whether you want to comment on this one, Alex, but basically the social media channel said that many of the summons that have been issued recently in the Kiev area had no legal force. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but clearly what we are seeing is the start of a backlash against the recruiting that's going on for ever younger people in Ukraine. Do you want to just comment on that one, Alex, or not?
Simply just to say, in view of time, that when these screenshots circulate, the documents always appear genuine to me. What you just showed on screen is no exception. The Ukrainian seems to be saying to me what it is claimed as saying. It's usually Russian language sources that then amplify it, and people shouldn't be skeptical simply because it's Russian or Russian language social media circulating these things. There is a lot of confusion as to who can do what. Even in peacetime in a country like Ukraine, you've got all kinds of layers and intersecting authorities competing against each other.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, let's just have a look at a very short clip about the reality of what the Ukrainian troops are facing, and that is overwhelmingly shelling. The shelling is causing the deaths. The minimum casualties that we see in Ukraine are 150,000 killed and probably 500,000 wounded. Some of those wounded may go back into battle, but these are the horrific statistics, and these death rates are occurring because of the intensity of the Russian shelling. Let's just have a look at this clip. It's important to watch it. It's not unpleasant in its own right. There's nothing which is graphic, but it just shows what is actually happening on the front. So a very short clip, but of course the reality is that men are enduring shelling for hours, days, weeks, months at a time. That is not only causing the death and injuries, but it's also certain to be causing mental injury to these men at the front. But of course, BBC, Western media does not want to admit that poorly trained Ukrainian troops are being slaughtered as a result of Western support and help.
Now, Brian's just shown a little bit of video with what appeared to be forced conscription going on, and one ethnic group within Ukraine that's claiming that they're being disproportionately targeted for this is Hungarians, people that hold joint Ukrainian-Hungarian passports and ethnic Hungarians in Ukraine. So let's bring this on screen. Do a quick translation of it. The Transcarpathian Brigade may suffer huge losses. It's probably a poor translation. Alex can correct it maybe. But let's see what it says. Most Subcarpathian Hungarians can serve in the 120th Mountain Hunting Brigade, and it is precisely this unit that is deployed in the bloodiest battles. Their exact losses are not known, but a lot of people probably died in the Solidar meat grinder. Interesting turn of phrase there. Soldiers returning home from the front also reported to our newspaper about real hell on earth. According to our information, the Transcarpathian morgues are also full, and they are deliberately slowing down the release of victims. So what is being claimed here is that huge numbers of ethnic Hungarians dying in Ukraine, that the bodies are being taken to morgues where they're sitting. The morgues are full. They're not releasing the names in order to try to drip feed them out and imply that, suggest that there are fewer people being killed than there are. Now, Viktor Orban has commented on this. He's concerned about this targeting of Hungarians and so on. But let's look at a couple of other things that are going on within Ukraine at the moment. So Ukraine punishes Transcarpathian Hungarians again, according to Hungary Today. A new regulation is making everyday life more difficult for Hungarians in Transcarpathia. Hungarians with dual Ukrainian-Hungarian citizenship are no longer allowed to cross the Ukrainian border with a Hungarian passport. So they're allowed to come into the country with a Hungarian passport, but they're not allowed to leave on the same Hungarian passport. They've got to have Ukrainian paperwork, which some of them don't have, it seems. Here's another one from the same source. Ukraine's new minority law codifies injustice. The new law, they're quoting here, the new law interprets minority rights as the rights of persons belonging to minorities only, exercisable individually, depriving them, brackets their communities and organizations, of the possibility to exercise their political, educational, and linguistic rights, and thus influencing their own destiny. And then finally, we've got this report here saying that in a joint statement, the Subcarpathian Hungarian Cultural Association and the Ukrainian Hungarian Democratic Association criticized this new law on the national communities of Ukraine. The law not only strengthens the legal restrictions previously codified in the Education and Language Act, but introduces new ones. And the quote here is, it does not guarantee the preservation of compact nationality settlement areas, nor the use of nationality symbols. So Alex, in some cases, they are the voices representing Ukrainian, Hungarian, or Hungarian Hungarians in Ukraine are even going as far as suggesting that there's ethnic cleansing going on. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this or any awareness.
It doesn't actually surprise me that the ethnic Hungarians, are making that claim, or the people back in their mother country in Hungary. They're not blameless themselves, the Magyars, the Hungarians, in expansionism and the drive for greater Hungary. But as with Slovakia, they do have justified claims that both of those Slavic nations have treated their citizens as subhumans for some while. In both world wars, the Hungarians often complained that they were being disproportionately put in the hardest fighting. For example, the occupation of Voronezh in southern Russia in the Second World War. I've been through that Transcarpathian area that's largely Hungarian, and even before the 2014 coup, there was a lot of tension in the air as they felt they weren't able to speak their language or teach their children their language or hold services in their language without molestation. It got a lot worse after the 2014 coup. Colonel Jack Bow, in an article that's still on the homepage of our website, goes into detail on that. The High Commissioner on National Minorities at the OSCE has long made this point with specific reference to the Hungarians. They are the most, should we say, eloquent of the national minorities. They've got a big daddy state backing them. But I'm afraid Orban, so by that token, we probably know more about what's happening to them than we do about other ethnic minorities like the Romanians and the Ruthenians. But Orban is increasingly isolated. His political affiliates, and certainly the oppositionists and conservatives who used to be in his coalition, have fallen away now and are starting to give interviews to Western and Ukrainian media saying Orban must change his mind and come down hard against the Russians in this war. But I am told that Hungary is about to drop its objection to the seventh tranche of EU military aid, which is going to be coming up in the Foreign Affairs Committee, if memory serves, of the Council of the EU. So you can't rely on Hungary to have the strength and unity to keep following through on this. But I'm afraid it doesn't surprise me, and there is quite a lot of potential for Hungarians to be disappeared and to make up the ranks of the sacrificial lambs. Certainly, that there's historical precedent for that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to Macron then.
Yes, a French viewer has spotted this, and so we'll bring that email up on screen. Macron has just nationalized SNPE, which is the explosives and propellants conglomerate. It used to belong to a French state-owned company called GIAT, which was itself a shareholder of Nexter, a Franco-German affair. The French viewer says that I believe this nationalization is a way of putting the state on the hook for forthcoming huge debts, which will be racked up while France massively provides Ukraine with ammunition, including, as we see, long-range ammunition now. Of course, says the alert French viewer, Ukraine won't pay, and this can't be accepted on the balance sheets of the Franco-German public-private partnership Nexter, which is made up of GIAT and the German partner Krauss-Maffei. That would put Nexter in jeopardy, and of course we can't have the Franco-German manufacturing base jeopardized. So EURENCO News reports in French on this. That will be on the show notes for those who read French. The puff piece says that EURENCO is reorganizing to boost its growth, but the graphic is what the viewer drew our attention to. So before reorganization, the French state shareholder directly owned GIAT, and that went all the way down to EURENCO, and then it split out. But now GIAT's out of the way, the French state goes down to this explosives and propellants manufacturer, and below that is EURENCO, including in Belgium, Sweden, and other European bases. So this is the French taxpayer directly now on the hook for what's going on there. A significant reorg, perhaps. We also have a rather laughable piece from the Council on Foreign Relations House journal, Foreign Affairs, which I know is doing the rounds among European policymakers to prove that the sanctions on Russia are supposedly working, just to draw attention to these three utterly hypocritical points that are made as to why the Russian economy is supposedly being defeated by these measures. Because inflation in Russia is actually underestimated, and this is not true of the EU and the US and the UK. The ruble is artificially propped up by state policy, as if this didn't apply to the dollar, sterling, and the euro. And dissidents are intimidated by long jail terms. That couldn't possibly apply to the West, could it?
Of course not. Of course not. But what about Poland and oil?
Yes, it's being put about that this may be a Russian attempt to do a tit for tat for what happened recently with the Nord Stream blow-up. So a blogger who has done a lot of good work in the past, Sam Fadis, who runs his blog called And Magazine on Substack, has picked up on what CBS and others have reported. The CBS News link is in this piece, so it'll be in the show notes too. He's asking who wants to blow up Poland's largest oil terminal. The breathing equipment and diving equipment you see on screen is what the Polish Coast Guard recovered from 3 men in a boat in a cold, dark, stormy night in the Baltic. When apprehended, they were suffering difficulty, as I say, in the storm. They said, "Sirs, we are 3 Spanish gentlemen diving for amber in a pitch dark winter night in a storm." That doesn't really go down very credibly, does it? So Sam reports this, and he says that expensive diving equipment was recovered just off the coast of Gdansk. Only one had ID. One of them gave a Spanish phone number that didn't have the right number of digits, a classic tell that my old profession intelligence uses to see that people aren't of the nationality that they claim to be. So thin cover. And this was right off NAFTA port, which is shortly going to be importing American liquid natural gas in a nice, brightly glowing, gas-filled, attractive target if the Russians do want to get their own back. So I do hope they don't, but don't say you weren't warned.
Yeah.
I just come in here, Alex, with a smile on my face and say, I wonder whether this was a staged operation for the company producing the Aqua Safe. Was that the title, the so-called harbour defence system? And I say that because, of course, it's becoming ever more obvious that many weapons manufacturers and supporting equipment manufacturers for the military and military operation are overjoyed that they can use the fighting in Ukraine as a live trial area for their equipment. So if you're into protecting harbours, what better than to have a little incident to get people worried about the potential of an underwater attack?
And Alex, just one final international story then from South Africa before we move back onto medical issues.
At a time when we're very concerned about digital, central bank digital currency and new currency zones emerging, the latest announced this week is Brazil and Argentina in talks to merge their currencies. You can go local, you can go under the superstate as well. So Volksstaat here is tweeting from the headquarters, as it were, of the Afrikaner Practical Independence Movement, the town of Orania. They have an aura. Its sign is a Greek or a Cyrillic letter phi. It's their currency. Here's some interesting measures that make it a little foolproof in the coming era. It's a coupon for local use only. It's secure. There's no point in robbing it. Rands, South Africa's national currency, which may soon become digi-rands as anywhere else, they earn interest, but auras, while auras circulate, and it's a symbol of that local community's independence with their own cultural images. The Germans are doing this left, right, and centre and have been for 20 years, and I think it's about time that we started following suit in the pampered and mollycoddled West.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, if you like what the UK Column does, you would like to support us, please head over to community.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there, or you could pick something up at the UK Column shop. But as usual, please do share what you see on the various platforms. And Alex, one announcement here.
Simply to draw attention to this, if you're in or near Dublin, at Leinster House on the Kildare Street side, they're going to have a rally, Say No to Gender Ideology and Pornography in Schools, on Thursday the 26th from 12 till 2, and they're calling that Hold the Line to Protect Childhood.
Okay, thank you for that.